You can spend 15 years holding someone's life together and still not warrant a chair at their table. I learned that at 34, standing in a storage room that smelled like concrete dust, holding a gift I'd spent 2 years making for people who couldn't spare me 6 square feet of garden space. My name is Claire, and the moment I realized I'd confused being needed with being loved, I stopped doing both. Welcome back. If you've ever been the person everyone calls but nobody sees, you already know this feeling. Stay with me. This one cuts deep before it heals. Let me tell you who I was before I tell you what I did. I'm a forensic accountant, the kind who sits in windowless rooms reconstructing financial trails from years of bank statements, finding the inconsistency on page 47 that everyone else missed. I built that career from night classes and library books, no cosigners, no safety net, no one calling to ask if I'd eaten. That part matters. Because in my family, I was never the daughter who needed checking on. I was the one who did the checking. When my parents' mortgage payment was late, I caught it. When Thanksgiving needed coordinating, I built the timeline. When Grandma Eileen needed her medication refilled or her heating system serviced before winter, I drove the hour out and handled it. Not because anyone asked. Asking would require noticing. I just did it, the way I'd been doing it since I was 20, and my mother looked at a pile of unopened bills and said, "You've always been good with this kind of thing." That was the job offer, no contract, no review. Just a permanent position managing the operational infrastructure of a family that only remembered I existed when something broke. My therapist once said that hyperresponsibility is trauma dressed in efficiency. She said it like a warning. I heard it like a resume. So when my parents' 40th anniversary approached, I was the obvious choice to organize it. I booked the venue, coordinated the caterer, arranged wheelchair transport for Grandma Eileen, managed every detail down to the linen colors. I just didn't know I was also arranging my own exclusion. The party was my mother's idea. Patricia Holloway loved milestones the way some people love mirrors, not for what they represented, but for what they reflected back. 40 years, 2 children, a mortgage paid off, a photo wall that could make strangers weep. She wanted proof. Something tasteful, she told me in February, 6 months before the August date, proper seating, real china, and make sure they photograph the garden. No please, no thank you. Just make sure. In our house, that meant Claire will do it. I started a planning binder, vendor quotes, dietary restrictions color-coded by severity, a seating chart I spent 9 evenings perfecting. And I worked on the gift. Something I'd been planning for nearly 3 years. My parents had exactly one photograph from their wedding, a faded Polaroid, cracked down the center, taped inside a kitchen drawer. I had it professionally restored, pixel by pixel, printed on archival paper in a custom walnut frame. And inside the presentation folder, beneath the photograph, I placed something else. Documentation I'll explain later. For now, just know that the gift sitting beside me as I drove to the venue that Saturday was the most expensive, most personal thing I'd ever created for 2 people who had never once remembered my birthday without a reminder. I thought this gift might change something. I thought maybe this time, the math would finally add up. Let me show you what a Tuesday looked like. 7:20 a.m. I text my younger brother Mason to remind him about Aunt Viv's birthday. He doesn't respond. 7:50, I update the family shared calendar with Grandma Eileen's Thursday appointment. I've been the admin since 2015, nobody appointed me, I just started posting updates and never stopped. 9:15, I confirm the August venue deposit. 11 o'clock, I email the caterer about my father's shellfish sensitivity, which he'll deny and my mother will quietly confirm. 2:30 p.m., my mother calls, no greeting. Just, the florist needs an answer about the arch. I tell her I already handled it. Perfect. Oh, and your father mentioned wanting shrimp appetizers. I remind her about the allergy. Pause. You always just know these things, Claire. 8 words. She'd been saying some version of them my entire life, and every time, it sounded like a compliment until you held it to the light. You always just know. Translation, I don't have to remember, I don't have to try, you'll handle it. By 6 p.m. I'd coordinated 4 vendors, prevented a medical incident, updated a calendar no one else checked, and reminded a grown man about a birthday he'd known about for decades. None of it was my responsibility. All of it was expected. The Holloway family ran on Claire, and Claire ran on the belief that if she stopped, everything would collapse. I was about to test that theory. My father, Richard Holloway, is 65 and has never entered a room without assessing the audience. Not from anxiety, from calculation. He coached youth soccer for 7 years even though Mason quit after 1 season. He volunteered for the town planning board and still mentions it at dinner parties. At his retirement event, he spoke for 12 uninterrupted minutes. Richard doesn't fear public speaking, he fears empty rooms. My mother is different. Patricia grew up in genuine poverty, 4 siblings in a 2-bedroom rental. She carried that scarcity into adulthood like a ledger she never closed. In her economy, love is finite. You invest it where the returns are clearest. Mason was the return, charming, effortlessly likable, high yield. I was infrastructure. You don't celebrate the foundation, you just assume it holds. Then there's Mason himself. He has never organized a family event, paid a vendor, or driven Grandma Eileen anywhere. He's never needed to. He showed up, smiled, got the best seat. The system rewarded him, so he never questioned it. And finally, there's Jordan Cross, my cousin, 28, intermittently employed, owner of a record that includes pawning Grandma Eileen's antique bracelet while she was recovering from surgery. My aunt begged Patricia to forgive him. She did, because family is family. Jordan sat at Christmas that year, for seats from the grandmother he'd stolen from, eating her cooking and asking for seconds. No one said a word. That was the architecture. Richard needed validation. Patricia allocated resources by return on investment. Mason collected dividends. Jordan got pardoned. I got the spreadsheet. There's a property upstate, a small house near Mirror Lake, about 2 hours north. It belonged to my grandfather before he died in 2012. Stone fireplace, dock that creaked like music if you were young enough not to know better. Every meaningful Holloway memory happened there. When he died, the house passed jointly to Richard and Eileen, then mostly to Richard when Eileen moved into assisted living. Mostly. Because Richard forgot to do the one thing my grandfather explicitly told him to do. Pay the property taxes. By 2018, the house was 3 years delinquent. The county had sent notices. Richard ignored them. In 2019, a lien notice arrived. I found it in the recycling. I didn't ask permission. I called the county, set up a payment plan, and over 4 years cleared the full balance, penalties included. $13,200 total, paid quarterly from my personal account. I documented everything, sent certified letters to Richard with receipts, return receipt requested. He never signed for one. Patricia did, twice. Neither called. I didn't tell anyone else because no one asked, and in the Holloway family, not asking was indistinguishable from not caring. The house stayed open, the dock kept creaking. Every holiday, Richard stood by the fireplace and told the story about how his father built it with his own hands. He never once mentioned who kept it standing. It was one of those details I carried quietly, like a deed folded in a back pocket, waiting. The Wednesday before the party, I placed the final piece in the presentation folder. The restored wedding photograph, professionally mounted. And beneath it, the property documents, paid in full certificate, copies of every payment, every certified letter. And a handwritten note. 40 years of memories, here's to 40 more. The lake house is clear and yours, with love, Claire. I sealed it, wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with twine. I held it for a long moment and imagined my father's reaction. Not the public face, the other one, the one I'd seen twice in my life, once when my grandfather died, once when Mason won a regional debate tournament. The unguarded face. The one that said, I see you. I thought this gift might unlock it. I thought 40 years of marriage and 4 years of silent payments and one impossible restoration might finally be enough. Enough for what? A real seat, maybe, an introduction that didn't include a qualifier, a moment where my name wasn't attached to a function. I placed the gift on my passenger seat and drove to the venue with the windows down and something fragile sitting in my chest. Hope. The kind that sits on top of years of evidence and still somehow floats. The venue was the garden behind Riverside Hall, white pergola, gravel lot, 70 guests. I'd chosen it because my mother wanted elegant but accessible, which meant expensive but with parking. The photographer was already working when I arrived, circling the floral installation I'd designed over 6 emails and a mood board. Everything looked right. I carried the gift and walked through the side entrance, past the bar setup, past the guest registry I'd assembled the night before. Everything I'd touched was functioning. I found the seating chart on the easel near the entry. Table 1, Richard, Patricia, Mason, Aunt Viv, Uncle Craig, Grandma Eileen. Table 2, the Cross family, including Jordan. Tables 3 through 9, extended family, neighbors, colleagues. I scanned every name card. My name wasn't there. I checked again, the overflow section, the auxiliary seating by the pergola, the children's table that had no children. Nothing. My name did not exist on the seating chart I had created. I stood there holding the silver-wrapped gift while a string quartet warmed up 30 feet away in a seating chart that didn't know I existed hung on an easel behind me. Then my father appeared, smiled the way you smile at a delivery person, and gestured toward the storage room. The storage room was attached to the main hall by a covered walkway. It smelled like motor oil and damp cardboard. They kept folding tables in there, traffic cones, a push mower with a rusted blade. My father walked me there with his hand on my shoulder, guiding without appearing to push. Inside, one chair, white plastic, the kind that leaves red lines on your thighs. Positioned between a workbench and a stack of orange cones. No table, no place setting, no name. A fluorescent panel overhead buzzed like a trapped insect. There was a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a hand. I noticed that because I wasn't looking at my father. If I looked at him, I'd see the expression, and if I saw it, I'd have to decide what to do, and I wasn't ready. "It's just for close family," he said. 5 words. Said the way you'd explain an airline policy, neutral, procedural, like the storage room was coach and the garden was first class and I simply hadn't earned the upgrade. I could hear the quartet through the wall, Pachelbel, I'd chosen that piece. And now I was hearing it through cinder block, standing next to a lawnmower, holding a gift I'd spent 2 years creating. My father adjusted his cufflinks and walked back to his seat. I sat down. The chair bit into my leg immediately. I placed the gift on my lap and looked through the walkway toward the garden. I could see part of table 2. I could see Jordan Cross leaning back in his chair, laughing. Jordan, who had stolen Grandma Eileen's bracelet, the one my grandfather gave her in 1976, pawned it for $180. Jordan, who never apologized because Patricia said to let it go. He's had a hard time. Jordan had a gold chair, a place card, a champagne flute, a view of the floral arch I designed. I had a plastic chair next to a can of WD-40. The quartet played, guests murmured, someone made a toast I couldn't hear. The event I had built from a binder and 9 late nights and a $650 string quartet was happening 30 feet away. And I was watching it through a doorway like a stagehand. I sat there for 14 minutes, I counted. In those 14 minutes, not one person came to check on me. Not one. That was the answer to a question I'd been afraid to ask for 15 years. I want to be clear about what happened next. There was no explosion, no thrown glass, no tearful exit. What happened was math. I sat in that plastic chair and calculated. 15 years of coordination, vendor management, medical appointments, holiday logistics. 4 years of quarterly tax payments on a property my father claimed as legacy. $13,200. 3 years of photo restoration work. 6 months of event planning. And 1 storage room. The numbers didn't create anger. They created clarity. I wasn't excluded. I was never included. I had mistaken utility for belonging, and that confusion had cost me 15 years of Tuesdays and Sundays and every holiday I'd organized but never enjoyed. The chair pinched my leg again. I looked down at the silver package. Inside was the most thoughtful thing I'd ever made, a restored past and a secured future, wrapped in twine. I'd made it for people who seated me next to a lawnmower. And the worst part, the part that tightened my jaw instead of filling my eyes, was that they expected me to stay. They expected me to sit here quietly, hear the speeches through the wall, and appear afterward to help clean up. Because I always had. Because I always understood. That's when the arithmetic became a decision. Not a dramatic one, not the kind that makes your heart race. The quiet kind. The kind that sounds like a lock turning in a door you didn't know you'd built. I stood. The chair scraped concrete, the sound echoed. I picked up the silver gift and walked through the covered walkway into the garden. No running, no stomping. I walked the way I walk into a deposition, steady, level, eyes forward. The quartet was between movements. The garden was in that suspended moment where everyone's mid-sentence and no one's paying attention. I crossed the lawn. My mother noticed first. She always noticed movement. Richard looked up. Mason paused mid-laugh. I walked past table 1, past table 2, where Jordan was eating shrimp with his fingers. Past the guest book, past the arch, past the bar. Toward the exit. I didn't stop. My mother's chair scraped. Claire. I kept walking. Claire, wait, don't do this here. I reached the gate, turned. She was 3 steps behind me, face arranged in the expression she used when someone was about to embarrass her in public, half smile, tight eyes, hands raised slightly, like calming an animal. You've always understood, Claire. Like a password, like the phrase that had always made me sit back down. I held up the silver gift so she could see it clearly. Then I said 3 words. Not anymore. I turned and walked to my car. She didn't follow. That night I sat on my couch with my phone face down beside me. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. The family group chat had 52 new messages. I scrolled past the surface chatter, beautiful event, love you both, and found the thread underneath. From 6 days earlier, buried below the main conversation. I'd missed it because my notification settings filtered admin messages separately, and I hadn't checked. The thread started with my mother. Seating update, Claire can go in the side area, she won't mind, she'll probably be coordinating anyway. My father, put her in the storage room, more space for the Hendersons. Mason's response, a laughing emoji, 3 words. She'll get it lol. The thread continued, 9 more messages, logistics about folding chairs, whether to tell me in advance. No, she'll overthink it. A note from Patricia, she's managing the caterer anyway so she'll be too busy to notice. 9 messages, 6 days. A coordinated plan to seat me in a storage room, discussed openly in a chat I managed. And no one thought to delete it because no one thought I mattered enough to look. I read it twice. I didn't screenshot it, I didn't need evidence. This wasn't a case. It was a fact I'd finally stopped avoiding. The family I'd been running for 15 years had never considered me family. They'd written it down, and the writing was careless because it was never meant for me. Because I was never on their minds. I put the phone down. Finished my water. Went to bed. In the morning, I made coffee and opened a new spreadsheet. Old habits. The headers were simple: task, frequency, last completed, replacement status. I listed everything. Grandma Eileen's medical coordination, appointments, insurance, pharmacy. The family calendar, birthdays, holidays, travel. The lake house, taxes, maintenance, winterization. My parents' household overflow, bills Patricia forgot, prescriptions Richard ignored. Mason's admin, dentist appointments I'd booked because he kept forgetting, car registration I renewed because he didn't know how. Event planning, every holiday, every birthday, every celebration for 15 years. The list ran to 38 items. 38 recurring tasks, never assigned, never acknowledged, never compensated. I looked at that spreadsheet the way I look at financials when the client insists everything's fine but the numbers say otherwise. The numbers always say otherwise. I wasn't going to slam doors, send manifestos, post anything. I was going to do something simpler and far more devastating. I was going to stop. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just stop. Remove myself as admin, cancel the recurring reminders, let the calls go to the people whose names were actually on the accounts. If the Holloway family ran on Claire, they were about to learn what happens when the engine walks away and no one else knows where the brake is. Monday morning, I removed myself as admin from the family group chat. No announcement, just changed the settings and left. By Wednesday, the chat had devolved into unanswered questions about Grandma Eileen's podiatry appointment. No one knew the address, the time, that she needed the west entrance because the east had a 2-inch lip her wheelchair caught on. I knew because I'd taken her there 9 times. I called Eileen directly, told her I'd still visit, that I loved her, that I was stepping back from family coordination, and if she needed something, she could call me directly, but scheduling would go through Richard or Patricia now. Eileen was quiet. Then, I wondered when you'd wake up. She didn't ask me to reconsider. She said, your grandfather used to say the post that holds the fence together is the first one they forget to paint. I hung up and cried for 4 minutes. Then stopped. And called the venue to redirect the final invoice to my mother. The family chat went silent for 5 days. The first crack appeared Thursday. Patricia called the podiatrist to reschedule and was told the account was under a different name, mine. She didn't have the login, the authorization code. She called me at work. I let it go to voicemail. The second crack came Saturday. The venue emailed Patricia about a deposit refund. She didn't know there was a deposit. She called Richard. Richard called Mason. Mason texted me. Hey, can you handle the venue thing? I didn't reply. The third crack was quieter. The family calendar, the shared calendar I'd maintained for 7 years, stopped updating. Aunt Viv's birthday passed without a single acknowledgement. A plumber I'd scheduled showed up at my parents' house on Monday. Richard answered the door in a bathrobe. No idea why a stranger was holding a wrench. For 15 years, I'd been the reason things didn't fall apart. And no one noticed. Because that's the nature of invisible work. 3 weeks after the anniversary party, the Holloway family still hadn't called to apologize. They'd called 14 times for technical support. By week 4, the tone shifted. No longer logistical. Now annoyed. Claire, why didn't you handle the catering refund? They're saying we owe $175. That was Patricia. Tuesday evening, voice sharp in the way it got when she was embarrassed but unwilling to admit it. I listened. Then, I'm not the office anymore, I'm just your daughter now. Silence. What does that even mean? It means the caterer's number is on the invoice. The invoice is in your email. She hung up. Richard's version came 2 days later, louder, less specific. Your mother is overwhelmed. The house is falling apart. What exactly are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, Dad. I'm just not doing it anymore. After everything we've... He stopped. Not because he realized what he was saying. Because he couldn't finish the sentence with facts. What had they done? He couldn't name it. The sentence just hung there, unfinished, empty. Mason didn't call. He texted. This is kind of dramatic, don't you think? I typed 4 responses, deleted all of them. Put my phone in a drawer and went for a walk. When I came back, there were 8 messages in a new group chat Patricia had created. Without me as admin. The thread was titled Family Coordination. It had 0 entries and 17 complaints. I visited Eileen on a Sunday. She was in her room at Oakwood, the facility off Highway 9, sitting by the window with a crossword and cold tea. She looked up when I walked in, her face softened. There's my girl. I sat on the edge of her bed and told her everything, the storage room, the group chat, the spreadsheet, the withdrawal. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her pen. Your mother was the same, you know. I looked at her. When Patricia married your father, she took over everything for our side, holidays, coordination, the whole operation. My sister Joan used to call her the secretary. Patricia hated it, said she'd never let her daughter feel that way. Pause. Then she had you, and you were so good at it, and I think she forgot. It was the closest anyone had come to explaining Patricia. Not excusing. Explaining. Patricia had been the backup once. She'd escaped by handing me the role. That didn't make it right. But it made her human. Eileen reached over and squeezed my hand. Keep that house standing, your grandfather would have wanted you to have it. I squeezed back. Eileen was 87 and sharper than any of them. The lake house issue surfaced in September, 6 weeks post-party. An envelope from the county, addressed to Richard Holloway. He called at 7:50 a.m., furious. There's a special assessment, $3,800. Did you know about this? I knew. I'd been tracking it for 18 months. The county was upgrading the sewer line. Every property on that road owed a share. I'd set aside funds, flagged the deadline on the family calendar, no one checked anymore. Deadline's October 10th, I said. You have 5 weeks. 5 weeks? Claire, you can't just, why didn't you tell us? It was on the calendar. What calendar? The one you deleted? The one nobody looked at. Silence. You need to handle this. No. The word sat there. I'd said it to clients, colleagues, strangers. Never to my father about family. It felt like setting down a box I'd carried so long my arms had forgotten what empty felt like. No, I'm not handling it. The house is in your name. The assessment is in your name. The county office is on Miller Street, open 9 to 4, Monday through Friday. He hung up. I sat at my table, staring at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear. From the unfamiliar weight of nothing. It started with a conversation at my friend Simone's house. Simone's a family therapist, private practice. We were having wine when she said, "You know there are thousands of women like you." She meant it clinically. I heard it personally. Women who ran their families without credit, who were the first call in a crisis and the last name on the invite, who mistook being essential for being valued. I asked if she'd ever thought about a group. She looked at me over her glass. I'd been waiting for someone to start one. We held the first meeting on a Tuesday in October, back room of a bookstore on Maple Street. 6 women came. 3 daughters, 2 sisters, 1 grandmother who'd been managing her son's household for 19 years and had never been invited to his wedding. We didn't call it therapy. We called it the backup chair. Because every one of us had been seated somewhere out of sight while the people we held together celebrated. The first woman who spoke, Angela, 48, office manager, said something I'll never forget. "Wait, I'm allowed to just stop?" She said it like she was asking permission to breathe. The room went quiet. Then someone laughed. Then someone cried. And we all sat there with lukewarm coffee, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Scene. The backup chair met every other Tuesday after that. By November, we had 17 members. Patricia's campaign started mid-November. She didn't call. She wrote. Handwritten, cream stationery, the kind she used for church thank yous. "Dear Claire, I don't understand what's happened. You've always been the strong one, the one who keeps us together. Without you, things are crumbling. Your father won't say it, but he's struggling. Mason can't manage the calendar. No one knows Grandma's schedule. You're tearing this family apart, and I don't think that's who you are. Signed, Love, Mum. The most she'd written me in 34 years. And every word was a job listing disguised as affection. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention the storage room. Didn't say sorry. She said things are crumbling. Translation: the machine is broken, come back and be the machine. Richard's approach was louder. He showed up at my office, stood in the lobby. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? I walked him outside. What did you do for me, Dad? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. We raised you. You raised me to run your household, that's not the same. He left. I closed my office door and sat for 8 minutes without moving. Here's what they called tearing the family apart. I stopped doing unpaid labor. That's it. If a boundary feels like betrayal to someone, it's usually because your labor felt like love to them. And only to them. By late November, the scope of my absence was visible. Aunt Viv mentioned no one had sent the Thanksgiving coordination email. Uncle Craig's wife called Patricia asking why Eileen's appointments hadn't been updated. There was no system. Nobody had told her because admitting that would mean admitting one person had been running everything. Mason tried. He created a Google Calendar, invited everyone, populated it with 4 entries. Thanksgiving, Christmas, his birthday, one labeled TBD. It lasted 6 days. On day 7, he double-booked Thanksgiving with a gym class and sent a group text. Can someone else do this? I'm drowning. He'd done it for 6 days. I'd done it for 15 years. Jordan resurfaced, posted a fundraiser link in the new chat, for car repairs. 2 people donated. Mason was one of them. The Holloway family was learning what it cost to run when the person who ran it stopped volunteering. It cost money, time, and most of all, the easy comfort of never thinking about who filled the gaps. The machine had a name. The name was Claire. Eileen's 88th birthday was December 9th. Patricia planned it. Which meant she called the same restaurant Eileen had been going to for decades and booked a table for 14. Didn't check dietary needs, didn't arrange transport, didn't call the grandkids. Just made a reservation and posted the date. I found out because Eileen told me. Your mother says there's a dinner. Eileen didn't want a restaurant. She wanted the lake house, cornbread, the fireplace, the sound of the water. But the house was locked in limbo. Richard hadn't paid the assessment, the October deadline passed, a penalty applied. He'd ignored it the way he ignored everything that required effort without applause. Patricia called 3 days before the dinner. Your grandmother wants you there, will you come? I said yes. Not for Patricia, not for Richard. For Eileen. Who had never put me in storage, never called me the capable one, never expected me to understand without being understood first. I agreed to sit at that table one more time. But I wasn't walking in empty-handed. And I wasn't walking in unaware. I spent the next 2 days preparing. Not a gift. A folder. Plain manila, tax records, vendor invoices, a printed timeline of every task I'd completed from 2009 to present. 38 items, 15 years, 0 acknowledgements. If they wanted a family gathering, they were getting a reckoning. The restaurant was called Harvest Rye, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, the kind of menu that uses artisan without irony. 14 Holloways around a long table. Richard at the head, Patricia beside him, Mason next to her, Aunt Viv, Uncle Craig, Jordan, somehow. 2 of Eileen's friends from Oakwood. And me at the far end, next to Eileen's wheelchair. I'd brought something. Not the folder, that was in my bag. I'd brought the white plastic chair from the storage room. I'd gone back to Riverside the week before, asked the manager if I could buy it. He said I could have it. I carried it into Harvest Rye and set it beside my assigned seat, the one closest to the kitchen door. Didn't unfold it, just leaned it against the wall behind me. White, scuffed, impossible to miss. Patricia saw it first. Eyes went to the chair, then me, then back. She said nothing. Richard didn't notice because Richard only noticed things that enhanced him. Mason glanced and looked away. Eileen reached over and touched my wrist. Good. It took 19 minutes. Richard waited until appetizers were cleared, the table in that warm lull where everyone's comfortable enough to say things they shouldn't. He leaned forward. Claire, we need to talk about the lake house. The table quieted. Not because it was sensitive. Because Richard used the voice, the patriarch tone, the one that sounds like a request but lands like an order. The assessment is overdue. There's a penalty, and apparently everything's in your name. It is, I said, because I set it up, because I've been paying it. We need you to transfer it back. Transfer what back? The account, the login, whatever you did. The house is family property, Claire, it belongs to all of us. I looked at him. He was doing the thing he always did, rewriting history in real time, turning my work into his inheritance. The house belonged to all of us. But the taxes belonged only to me. You're still family, Richard said. And here it came. When we need you. He said it like a compliment. Around the table, faces shifted. Viv looked at her plate, Craig's wife looked at Craig, Mason looked at his phone. Jordan looked at the bread. Patricia looked at me with the expression she wore when she knew something was breaking but hoped smiling would hold it together. I reached into my bag and set the folder on the table. Didn't stand, didn't raise my voice. Opened it, turned it so they could see. This is every task I've done for this family since 2009, medical coordination, calendar management, event planning, vendor oversight, household admin, Mason's registration, Dad's prescriptions, Mom's returns. I turned the page. This is the lake house. In 2019, I found a lien notice in the recycling. You owed 3 years of taxes plus penalties. I paid it, $13,200 over 4 years. I sent certified letters, return receipt. Your mother signed for 2. The receipts are here. Turned again. And this was your anniversary gift. I pulled the silver folder from the bottom. Still wrapped, twine slightly frayed. Untied it, opened it. The restored photograph, Richard and Patricia, 1990, courthouse steps, borrowed clothes, holding hands, young and terrified. Beneath it, the paid certificate, canceled checks, certified receipts with Patricia's signature. The card, 40 years, here's to 40 more, the house is clear and yours, love, Claire. The table was silent. Eileen's hand on my arm. Viv's hand on her mouth. I looked at my father. You put me in a storage room the night I was going to give you this, on a plastic chair, between a lawnmower and traffic cones. You planned it in a group chat, laughed about it, and you did it because you thought I'd understand. I let the silence hold. I do now. Richard's face cycled through 3 stages: surprise, calculation, fury. The calculation mattered most, that half-second where he decided whether to apologize or attack. The needle swung to attack. Because apologizing would mean admitting the storage room was wrong, and admitting that would mean admitting the entire system was wrong. And the system was Richard. You're twisting this, he said, voice rising. You were part of the setup, you were helping, nobody put you there as punishment, you were there because that's where the extra chairs were and you always help. There was one chair, Dad, and you smiled. His neck reddened. This is exactly why you take everything personally, everything has to be about you. I've spent 40 years building this family and you're going to destroy it over a chair. I didn't raise my voice. You didn't build anything, I did, you showed up. The table flinched. Richard stood, chair scraped. Patricia started crying, the composed kind, preloaded, designed to redirect. Claire, please, you've always understood, we didn't mean. I finally do. 3 words. A door closing. Patricia's script ran out. She had no line after you've always understood because no one had ever refused the cue. Mason stared at the table. Jordan shifted. Aunt Viv turned to him. While we're at it, Jordan, where's my mother's bracelet? The table cracked. Not into chaos. Into honesty. And I sat there, at the end of that oak table, next to the woman who'd always seen me, with a folding chair leaning against the wall. It's just for close family, I said to Richard. So treat me like it. He didn't smile. For the first time in 65 years, the patriarch had no audience. I closed the folder. Placed the silver package, photo, documents, card, in front of Eileen. This was always for you. Eileen looked at the photograph of Richard and Patricia on the courthouse steps, touched the frame with one finger. Looked up. Your grandfather would have put you at the head of the table. I stood. Not in anger, not in victory. In the same steady way I'd walked out of the storage room 4 months earlier. Except this time I wasn't carrying a secret. I was setting it down. I'm not going no contact, I said. I'm not disappearing, I'm just going home, to my own table. I looked at my mother. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with my name on a real chair, not a task list, not a role, my name. Patricia didn't answer. Richard didn't answer. Mason looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the language. Eileen wheeled back from the table. I pushed her toward the door. No one stopped us. The night air was cold, sharp, The lot smelled like wet asphalt and pine. I helped Eileen into my car and folded her wheelchair into the back. She buckled in. "I'd like cornbread tomorrow." "I'll make cornbread tomorrow." We drove through the dark, heater on, radio off. Eileen hummed something old, maybe one of my grandfather's songs. The folding chair was still inside Harvest Rye. I didn't need it anymore. I had my own chair now. The fallout was measurable. Within 2 weeks, Patricia hired a care coordinator for Eileen, $1,600 a month. The caterer sent a collections notice for the refund no one processed. Mason's registration lapsed, he got pulled over with expired tags. The lake house assessment, now $4,220 with penalties, sat unpaid on Richard's counter. He paid it in January, after a second county letter. Jordan's fundraiser raised $340. Aunt Viv blocked him after the bracelet question led to a text that included, "They were just in a drawer anyway." The Holloway family was learning what it cost to function when the person who made it function stopped volunteering. It cost money, time, and the easy, unexamined comfort of never thinking about who held it together. Most of all, it cost them the story they'd been telling themselves. That things just worked. The machine had a name. The name was Claire. By February, the backup chair had 31 members. We'd moved to the community center on Oak Street. Angela brought banana bread to every meeting, called it, "the only baking I do for people who notice." Simone facilitated. I mostly listened. Learning how to sit in a room without running it. My practice grew, 3 new clients. I repainted my kitchen. Went on a date with a man named Ethan who didn't ask me to organize anything, not even the reservation. He picked the place, made the call, pulled out my chair. I almost cried. Eileen came for Sunday dinners. I made cornbread every time. She sat at my table, the real one, the oak one I bought at an estate sale, and told stories about my grandfather and the lake and the sound the dock made in summer. I sat at the head of that table. Nobody assigned me there. I just pulled up a chair. On a Sunday in late February, Eileen and I sat at my kitchen table after dinner. The restored wedding photo, the one from the silver folder, was hanging in my hallway. Eileen had insisted. Let them earn it back. The frame caught afternoon light. Richard and Patricia, 1990, courthouse steps, borrowed clothes, holding hands. 2 people once young enough to be terrified and brave at the same time. I looked at it every morning on my way out. Not with anger, not longing. With the steady recognition that love without respect is just labor. And I was done working for free. A chair you have to earn every day was never really yours. The people who love you don't attach conditions to your seat. They pull it out before you arrive. And the day you stop paying rent at someone else's table is the day you find out where you actually belong. I found my place. It wasn't in storage. It was at a table I built myself, surrounded by people who never once asked me to understand. That's my story. 15 years of invisible work, 1 plastic chair, and a gift they never got to open. If you've ever been your family's backup, the one who holds everything together and gets seated last, this is your sign. You're allowed to sit down. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Subscribe if this landed. I'll see you in the next one.